I never wanted my parents to pay for my wedding. I had always dreamt of a simple ceremony with only close family and friends in attendance. But my parents insisted, telling me that they wanted to give me the best start to my new life. Reluctantly, I agreed, thinking that it was only fair to let them have their way since they had done so much for me already. My parents and I have always had a complicated relationship. They were overbearing and controlling and constantly made decisions on my behalf without consulting me first. Even when I was an adult, they still treated me like a child, and it was exhausting. But at the same time, I knew that they loved me and had my best interests at heart, even if their methods were misguided. My relationship with my sister, on the other hand, was almost non existent. We had grown apart over the years, ever since the day of my first wedding. She had come to the ceremony drunk, causing a scene and ruining the whole day. I was humiliated and devastated, and it took me a long time to recover from the trauma of that day. After that, I tried to distance myself from her, not wanting to be associated with her erratic behavior. But my parents didn't see it that way. They were always trying to push us back together, telling me that family was important and I should forgive and forget. But it was easier said than done, and I found it hard to trust her again. I couldn't understand how they could be so blind to what she had done to me. It wasn't just the embarrassment and humiliation of her drunken behavior. It was the fact that she had shattered my trust in her. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for what she had done. But my parents were persistent. They would call me every few days asking if I had spoken to my sister, if I had invited her over for dinner, and if I had considered asking her to be my bridesmaid at my upcoming wedding. I felt suffocated by their constant pressure, and it made me resentful of both of them. I tried to explain to them that I just couldn't trust my sister again and that I didn't want her anywhere near my wedding day, but they didn't seem to understand. "She's your sister. You have to give her a chance," they would say, as if that made everything okay. In the end, I had to be firm with them. I told them that I didn't want my sister at my wedding and that I couldn't take the risk of her ruining the day again. It was hard for me to say it because I knew how much it would hurt them, but I also knew that I had to do what was best for me. They didn't take it well. They accused me of being selfish and of not considering their feelings, but I stood my ground, and eventually they backed down. Or so I thought. I was nervous as I walked down the aisle, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been dreaming of this day for so long, imagining every detail, every moment, but now that it was here, I was consumed with anxiety. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, their proud smiles beaming as I made my way to the altar. But as I got closer, my heart sank, because standing there in the front row was my sister. I couldn't believe it. I had made it clear to my parents that I didn't want her at my wedding and that I couldn't take the risk of her ruining it again. And yet, there she was, looking up at me with a smug grin on her face. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. How could my parents do this to me? How could they ignore my wishes and invite her anyway? Didn't they understand how much she had hurt me? I tried to focus on my fiancé, on the love we shared, and on the future we were building together. But all I could see was my sister, a constant reminder of the pain and humiliation of my first wedding. As the ceremony went on, I could feel her eyes on me, her presence like a dark cloud hanging over the day. I wanted to scream, to run away, to demand that she leave, but I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing that she had gotten under my skin. But as we exchanged our vows, I couldn't help but think of how different things could have been. If my parents had just listened to me, if they had respected my wishes, maybe I could have had the wedding I had always dreamed of. Maybe I could have enjoyed this moment without feeling like I was being watched, judged, and criticized. After the wedding, I confronted my parents, demanding to know why they had invited my sister without telling me. Their response was cold and calculated. "Everything comes with a price," they said. I almost cried. I tried to avoid my sister as much as possible, but she seemed to be everywhere, lurking in the corners, whispering to my parents, making snide remarks about my dress and my hair. It was like a nightmare coming to life. All the joy and excitement of the day were replaced with fear and anxiety as I wondered what she would do next. Would she spill a drink on me? Would she insult my new husband? Would she try to start a fight? I felt like a prisoner trapped in a situation that I couldn't control. And as I looked around at the smiling faces of my guests, I couldn't help but feel like a fraud. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but all I could think about was how my family had betrayed me. It wasn't until later when my husband and I were alone that I could finally let myself cry. I told him everything about my sister's behavior, about my parents' betrayal, about how it had all made me feel. And for the first time since I had seen my sister at the altar, I felt like I could breathe again. But the damage had been done. The memory of that day would always be tainted by the presence of my sister and by the feeling that my parents had chosen her over me. Update 1. After that day, I cut all ties with my parents. I was hurt and angry, feeling like they had chosen my sister over me despite her actions. I didn't want anything to do with them, and I made it clear that I didn't want them in my life, but they were persistent, constantly trying to reach out to me, sending me messages and calling me nonstop. At first, I tried to reason with them to explain why their actions had hurt me so deeply, but they just didn't seem to understand. They kept telling me that family was important, that I should forgive and forget, and that I was being selfish for not wanting to reconcile. But I couldn't just forget what had happened, and I couldn't bring myself to forgive them for what they had done. As the months went by, their attempts to reach out to me became more and more forceful. They would show up unannounced at my doorstep, trying to force their way into my life. They would send me gifts and cards, hoping to guilt me into accepting them back into my life. But nothing they did could change the way I felt. When my husband and I found out that we were expecting a baby, we were over the moon. We had always talked about starting a family together, and we were excited to take this next step in our lives. Sure enough, when my parents found out about the pregnancy, they began to reach out to us again. At first, it was just emails and messages, but soon they started to escalate their efforts. They would call my husband's phone and leave desperate voicemails begging to be a part of our lives again. They would send gifts and letters addressed to our unborn child, trying to guilt us into letting them be there for the birth. We sent them a firm message telling them that we didn't want them in our lives and that their attempts to contact us were only pushing us further away. A few days later, my husband received a call from my father. He was demanding that we let them be there for the birth of their grandchild, saying that it was a family event and that they had a right to be there. I was livid. How dare they try to barge their way into such a personal and intimate moment? I had made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with them, and yet they were still trying to force their way back into my life. We made sure to keep our hospital plans a secret from everyone except for a select few trusted friends and family members. When our son was born, it was just my husband and me in the delivery room, and it was the most magical and special moment of my life. It wasn't until I had my child, my beautiful little boy, that they started to realize the gravity of their actions. They wanted to see their grandson, to be a part of his life, but I couldn't just forget what had happened, and I couldn't bring myself to let them back into my life, not after what they had done. So when they reached out to me again, asking to meet their grandson for the first time, I knew what I had to do. I told them the same thing they had told me 3 years ago, that everything comes with a price. And the price of their actions was that they were no longer a part of my life or the life of my child. I couldn't let my child be manipulated by my parents like I was. It was better that he grew up happy and away from their toxic behavior. They should have respected her decision in the first place, then all of this wouldn't have happened. Who told them to act like complete a-holes? It's understandable why she stopped talking to her parents after they repeatedly disrespected her boundaries. It was her special day, and she had every right to invite or not invite whoever she wanted. Her baby, her decision. It was important for her to have a peaceful and stress-free delivery without the added pressure of her parents' presence. Telling them the same words they told her on her wedding day was a powerful statement. I don't think she's TA. Next story. Every year, my husband, Matt, and I make Halloween buckets for all the kids in the family, which includes our daughter, Madeline, who is 16, and two nephews, Noah and Jaden, who are 8 and 10. I want to clarify that my sister Sarah is a good person, but she can be immature at times. She'll make a statement that you would expect from a middle schooler and not an adult mother. Sarah came with Noah and Jaden to pick up the buckets, and they stayed for a bit. Madeline was out clothes shopping with Matt. Sarah looked in Madeline's basket as well and asked why we were still making one for her because she's almost 17. Aren't these supposed to be for the actual kids? I told Sarah that it's just a way Matt and I show Madeline that we love her. Madeline's initial foster parents were pieces of shit. A big focus of Matt and I is making sure Madeline knows she's special and appreciated by us. Sarah kept saying that the candy and gifts could have gone towards Noah and Jaden instead, since they're the actual kids. Sarah saw that Madeline's bucket had a gift card to build a bear and said, "Almost 17 and she's still dragging you to build a bear? Noah outgrew that place years ago. When is Madeline going to start acting her age and grow up?" I responded that Sarah, the one who needs to grow up here, is frankly you. Noah and Jaden started giggling and Sarah left. It's been almost a week and family members are still contacting me to say I'm an a-hole because I know Noah and Jaden look up to me as their uncle, yet I still decided to undermine Sarah's authority in front of her own kids and basically taught my nephews that it's okay to disrespect their mother. I believe that Sarah was being the poor example by saying rude things about Madeline and trying to dictate whether or not I can give my own daughter a Halloween bucket. But was I still an a-hole for telling Sarah to grow up in front of her own impressionable kids? NTA. If Madeline has been in the foster system, it's likely she hasn't had much of a stable childhood. If she's interested in doing more childish things like build a bear, that's awesome. Much better than dabbling in drinking and drugs like some teens do. NTA. Sarah was trying to dictate how you should celebrate a holiday with your family, which is a personal decision and should be respected, and usurp something meant for your child to give to hers. You were actually quite kind with your response. She needs to do more than just grow up. NTA. I don't actually think you disrespected her. You stood up for your kid. She's the one that was setting a bad example for her kids by being ungrateful for the gifts you'd given and feeling entitled to more. You're right, she does need to grow up. Next story. I'm 25, female. My brother, 29, male, and my sister-in-law, 31, female, recently had their lease ended. They have a new apartment, but not until December. My sister-in-law is also 6 months pregnant. They have been staying with me for a while now and would be staying for another month since money is tight and hotels here are very expensive where I live. I'm vegan, and I have been for years. Before that, I was vegetarian. My brother has always been making fun of me for it. Before sister-in-law and my brother moved in, I told them that I don't want any meat or fish in my house. The smell of fish and meat makes me gag, and I also love cooking and don't want my knives and pans touching it. My sister-in-law was fine with it. My brother complained, but eventually agreed since they don't have anywhere to go. Now, it went okay in the beginning until I started to notice lots of packaging from meat in the trash can. I talked to my brother about it, and he said he only cooked it when I wasn't there so I wouldn't smell it. I really didn't like it because it had been in my pans and touched my knives and cutting board, etc. But I decided to let it go and told him he could cook meat and fish when I'm not there, but use his own pans and knives. He said he would get his stuff in a few days. They're in storage, and then would wait to cook meat and fish until he got them. Well, last week he was cooking meat. I didn't notice immediately because I was in an online meeting in my bedroom. Again, in my pan and with my knives, etc., because he didn't have time to get his stuff from his storage. 20 minutes drive. I got really mad and said it would be his last warning. A day later, he started making bacon and eggs, again in my stuff. He then said he only cooked meat because of sister-in-law's pregnancy cravings. She wasn't even there, didn't come home a few hours later, and I know she doesn't even like bacon. Maybe she had pregnancy cravings, but she wasn't even home, so it made no sense anyway. I wanted to let it go, but when he started laughing in the evening to my sister-in-law that he had such a lovely bacon sandwich, I kicked my brother out. Now he's been staying in a way too expensive hostel, sharing a room with 7 other people. My sister-in-law said she finds it important to let her baby bond with the father, my brother, and is now also looking to stay at the same hostel or look for a hotel they can't afford. She did understand me though, but I think she also thinks I overreacted. I feel bad for them, especially her, but it's not easy as a pregnant person to stay at a hostel while working, etc. But I feel like I didn't kick her out and I gave him enough chances. I know it sounds silly because it's just meat and fish for many people, but I just don't want to live in a place like that. Or should I just have let it go? I feel disrespected. My friends are 50-50. I don't have any family to ask. Edit. I'm not asking them to be vegan. I originally asked them to be vegetarian, then switched to cooking meat, fish in their own pans when I'm not present. Eggs and cheese have never been a problem, and I wouldn't ask them to go vegan, especially not anyone pregnant who knows nothing about veganism. NTA. They were living with you rent-free, and all they had to do was maintain the one boundary you set. A boundary you made very clear prior to them moving in. A boundary they, well, your brother, broke multiple times and were warned about each time. They reached the find out stage of frick around, and here we are, especially since you were still offering to let sister-in-law stay with you, and she's choosing to go to the hostel of her own accord. I don't think there's anything else you can do here. I guarantee you that allowing your brother back in the house will result in him cooking more meat. He was given every chance to stop before and did not. And letting him back in will just be proof that he can get away with it again. Not the a-hole. You gave him a bunch of different options. It would be one thing if she had doctor's orders to eat meat and he was only cooking it for her. If that was the case, I would tell you to chill out. She might need to eat meat, and I do think that you should let her do it in the house, even if it wasn't doctor's orders. It's pretty reasonable to assume that a pregnant person is going to need that much iron and protein. But you did let them do that. All he had to do was get his own pans. And all he had to do was cook meat for her instead of cooking bacon for himself while you were home on your pans. Which is exactly what you asked him not to do. It's also nice of you to continue to allow her to stay, and I think that was the right choice. A person who's that pregnant probably shouldn't be staying at a hostel like that, and I honestly am not sure that it's safe. There are all sorts of weird diseases that can exist at a hostel. If she wants to go, let her go. NTA, first, what for stupid planning to have a lease that is just 2 months or more after the old ended. They really seem to have planned that they could stay with you when they signed the new lease, knowing that you are vegan, that you can't stop eating meat and fish for those few weeks, or eat outside. You even were nice and offered them to just use their pans and so, but no, the 20 minutes was too much for him. He had no respect for you, such a selfish AH. Meat was more important than a free place to stay together with his pregnant wife. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.